live on Facebook.
Hey everybody, welcome to night 5 of the Progressive Candidate Summit. I'm joined here tonight by Dawn Zuppelli, who is doing our sign language interpretation. Thank you, Dawn, for being here. I'm so glad that we're doing this because I think our goal is being realized. I want more people to have a personal connection to some of these fabulous progressive candidates that are running all throughout the country. You know, somebody might not be running as a congressperson in your district. They might not even be running as a senator in your state, but they all vote on all public policy that comes before Congress and that comes before the Senate. So it matters. And there are ways that you can be actively involved with all of these campaigns, regardless of whether or not they're your district or your state. First of all, obviously through your financial donations. And as I've been saying, you know, if everybody, all the thousands of people who are watching this summit each gave $3, $5, these candidates, we would be raising real money for these people. And also, as Robin Wilt, our wonderful candidate who is here with us tonight, I'm very much looking forward to introducing you to her. We'll be able to tell you, you can phone bank for somebody, regardless of whether or not they're in your district or your state. We'll talk more about that later. We know that we are in the middle of a profound moment in American history. Today, there were protests all over the United States. The overwhelming majority of them are peaceful. I tweeted about an hour ago that at the risk of sounding corny, I'm just so proud of my fellow Americans. This thing began in response to one particular issue, and that had to do with a well-established pattern of the execution of unarmed Black men and the police brutality that was involved there. And the situation has blossomed, it has bloomed, it has expanded into even more. For one thing, as we know, many, many peaceful protesters around the country have themselves been treated brutally by police. We also know that there were looters, there were rioters, and appropriate police forces understood there. But something more is going on. And what there is in the United States today is a cry for change that is fundamental, that has to do with a change, transformation, fundamental transformation in the way we police in the United States. We're asking deeper questions about what is the role of a police force? We know that we're supposed to train our military personnel to be able to kill if necessary, to treat a combatant that they are opposing as an enemy. But our police are supposed to serve and protect, remember? They're supposed to be peacekeepers. And too often they receive, in fact, I think it's probably correct to say pretty much all the time, they receive no basic training in how to keep the peace. We need social workers in there. We need nonviolent communicators. We need citizen patrols. We need police who are trained not just in brute force, but also in soul force. This is a time of such change. These protests matter. We are standing for real change, but nothing fundamental is going to change until we elect new people. And once again, it can't just be the presidency, it also has to be Congress. And that brings me to my guest here tonight. I'm very excited to introduce you to Robin Wilt. She is running for the House of Representatives in District 25 in New York. Robin, come on into the Zoom room. I'm so happy that you're here with me. Hi. Oh, they haven't unmuted you. Hey, hi, welcome.
Thank you so much, Marianne. Thank you for doing these progressive summits because I think it's so important that we have progressive leadership in Congress right now, especially at this moment.
One of the things that we have articulated, of course, is the real difference between a corporatist and a progressive Democrat. So many people right now are just, oh, I just want the Democrat to win. But as we know, there are different shades of blue, and the corporatist, and there's the corporatist and the progressive. And you are not only a great candidate, you are a progressive candidate. I want to give a little historical context to your race. A woman very beloved in progressive circles, Louise Slaughter, was there for many years. And at the age of 88, fell, had a concussion and died. And in the race that followed to replace her, there was elected a basically corporatist candidate who is now your opponent. Am I saying it correctly?
That is correct. He was elected with a plurality of the vote of Democrats, not the majority.
Okay, so what, in my opinion, I'm sure the opinion of many, you're the real heir to the legacy of Louise Slaughter. Would you say that?
I would definitely say that.
Okay, well, tell people, our audience get to know you. Who are you? Where do you come from? I know that both parents were immigrants from Guyana and South America. So you have that. You're a Black woman in America. You were a child of immigrants. Tell us who you are. Tell us what you stand for, and tell us what you're going to do when we get you into the House of Representatives.
I certainly will. And again, my name is Robin Wilt, and I'm running for Congress in New York's 25th Congressional District. And the 25th Congressional District includes the entirety of the city of Rochester and most of Monroe County. And I'm a child of this region. My father, William Reynolds, immigrated to the United States in 1968 from, as Marianne said, Guyana, South America. He, along with my mother and my older sister. My dad came to Rochester and he joined the Eastman Kodak Company at a time of incredible racial strife in both our country and our community. My family immigrated to the US in the same year that the Fair Housing Act passed. They came to the United States because they believed in the promise of the American dream. But what my family didn't realize is that for far too many, the American dream is a dream deferred, and America is failing to live up to its basic promise of justice and equity for all. My parents came to this country with just $40 in their pocket because they believed, as I do, that what the people want is very simple. They want an America as good as its promise. And what we want is an America where an immigrant family like mine that got by on government subsidies can go on to attend the nation's best colleges and universities and achieve their full potential. Now, you mentioned the congressional district that I'm in. The 25th congressional district is the chosen home of Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass, as we know, was a great civil rights pioneer. But the Rochester and Monroe County that we see, it stands out as a glaring example of the rampant and unsustainable wealth inequality that plagues our entire country. And I will tell you that a recent study by the financial company 24/7 Wall Street found that our congressional district, the 25th congressional district, is the second worst of all congressional districts in the country. We're ranked 434 out of 435 in this country when it comes to quality of life for African Americans. And so disparate outcomes along racial lines in the 25th CD, they're largely the legacy of structural racism and the generational theft of wealth from our communities of Black and Brown people. Rochester is one of the many cities across the country that enacted restrictive housing covenants and exclusionary zoning policies in the early 20th century. And these policies are clearly visible in the residential patterns that we see across our city and across our county today. Now, my family, they moved to a suburban enclave in 1976. As I said, my parents are immigrants. They were looking for educational opportunity. And unfortunately, in this country, educational opportunity is tied to your zip code. And naively at the time, I was 8, of course, I didn't appreciate growing up what a pioneering move that was, of course. But looking back on it now, I don't think it's any coincidence that my father had to purchase land and had his house built from the ground up. Because quite frankly, as a Black man in 1976, it was easier to build his house from scratch than to trust any of the housing developments at the time to offer him equitable terms. And I share these narratives about my father and our family's immigration story because I really want to highlight the structures that were in play, but are still in play to this day, that reinforce the disparate outcomes that we see for people in our community. And that's based on race, that's based on class, that's based on gender, ethnicity, and sexual orientation. And ultimately, that's why I'm running for Congress. I'm running for all of the people of the 25th Congressional District that deserve to have those people-centered policies that work for all of us and not just the politically and financially connected in our community. And I've really spent the last decade and a half working in that struggle. As you mentioned, Louise Slaughter, she was also an activist. That's the means by which she came to represent our community. And I've been working to promote that social, economic, and environmental justice that we all deserve in our community. But we just have a long way to go in order to achieve the goals of that struggle, in order to achieve a Green New Deal, single-payer healthcare, economic equality, police and criminal justice reform. We talked about that, housing for all, humane immigration policies, educational equity, and an end to the school to prison pipeline, and full LGBTQ and women's rights, and really just ending that toxic influence of money on politics. And we can't get there unless we remove the people who have been barriers to achieving that progress. And quite frankly, my opponent, Joe Morelli, has been one of those barriers. He is a lifelong politician, an establishment politician who ran the Democratic Party in Monroe County for a long time. And while he's only been in Congress for about 18 months, prior to that, he served for over 30 years in the state assembly. And during that time, he was an architect of those self-same policies that generated the disparate outcomes that we see in our district today. So that's why I think it's so important that we have new leadership in Monroe County, new leadership that is not going to take those corporate donations that result in the policies that create the disparities that we see in our communities.
Okay, everybody. I mean, if you're not reaching for your credit card now, I don't know what to say to you. I hope you'll go to Wilt for Congress, WILT for Congress.com. Do what you can, even $5. If do what you can. The progressive voices like Robin's are not the ones that are being established, not just that are being supported, not just by major corporate interests, but even by the Democratic establishment itself. If we want Robin in Congress, we have to put Robin in Congress. Now, Robin, Black woman, went to a Black Lives Matter protest today.
Yes.
Would love to hear your thoughts about what's happening, and also some specific ideas about the kinds of changes that you would like to help bring forth as a US Congressperson.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what we've seen is not only the militarization of the police, but also a lack of accountability. And Rochester is very fortunate in that they recently passed a police accountability board that gives citizens the ability to subpoena and also to look at those police records and issue disciplinary actions against the police. And that has been thoroughly pushed back on by the police unions. They have embroiled us in lawsuits in order to prevent that statute from being implemented. And this was a referendum that occurred in our district that garnered 75% of the vote.
I want to interrupt you just for a moment because I want to make sure everybody is following this. In the New York Times today, there is an article about the police unions. I'm certainly very pro-union. I'm sure that you are as well, Robin, right?
Yeah.
However, when you think about unions and then you think about the police unions, we're talking about worlds apart. Unfortunately, today, police unions stand for everything that you normally do not associate with labor unions. And like Robin just said, 75% of the residents in her district voted for higher accountability for the police. And what she was just saying was that the police union fought back against it. And that's what this article about in the New York Times is about today, is how much the police unions are an obstruction to reform. There's a contest here that's huge. And also, Robin, I think something we're all seeing that's very interesting right now is really where the struggle lies between mayors and police.
Yes.
I saw the mayor of Chicago. Did you see the gauntlet she laid down
Yeah.
But I think some of these police really are not taking as they're supposed to. They don't seem to be taking their orders from their mayor. They seem to be taking the orders from what they hear Trump say. And if Trump says dominate the streets, if Trump says overwhelming force, no matter what sometimes the police chief says or the mayor says. Am I wrong to think we have a problem that is that intense?
No, I do think we have a problem that is that intent. What we see is that the police are more like an occupying force as opposed to a peaceful force that is protecting and serving the communities. And if you're not connected to the communities that you're serving, you're going to come in as an outsider and suppress and oppress as opposed to work collaboratively with the community. So,
And we used to have more community policing.
yeah.
And then that era has left. We need to be training. It's a whole cultural issue, isn't it? What is the alternative to the police as an occupying force? Is that they go back to what we were all raised to believe they were supposed to be, to serve, to protect, to be peacekeepers. So it seems to me that we need a transformation of the entire culture of the police. Now, I want to ask your opinion on some of the specifics here, because there's a lot of talk about defunding police departments. So where do you go with that in your head?
Well, where I go with that in my head is I look at the budget. Again, a very wise person said, don't tell me what your priorities are, show me your budget. And when I look at our own town's budget toward policing, I see that we spent 40% on our police force. And so that's very
That
demonstrative.
says it all, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And so that comes at a great opportunity cost for our community, right?
It does, because if we spend more of that money on educating our children, you were
Right.
talking about children in your neighborhood, you were talking about your own parents. To me, it is a passive form of oppression. The very fact that our funding of our educational system publicly is primarily as property taxes.
Yeah.
Some of these children, millions of American children, are in lockdown by the time they're 8 years old.
Yeah.
Not having learned to read, chances of high school graduation diminished, chances of incarceration so increased. So we're spending all this money to suppress people who might be tempted to act out their despair, when we should be spending the money removing the factors that create so much despair.
Absolutely. And I think what we see is just disparate policing depending on the community that you're in. I mean, we have that rampant segregation in Rochester. And I will tell you that I went to a couple of rallies today. I went to one in my hometown in Brighton, New York, and the whole tenor was different. And we don't have consistent standards across all of our police.
I want to hear more about what you're saying. You're saying you went to two different rallies. What,
Yeah.
was one in a white neighborhood and one in a black neighborhood? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. One was in a predominantly white community, the town in which I govern, my hometown, Brighton, New York, and the other was in the city of Rochester. And in the city of Rochester, we had drones buzzing around overhead. And during our moment of silence, that was the only thing that you could hear. You could hear the drones buzzing overhead. And in the town of Brighton, there was a very light presence. They were definitely there to cooperate with the community to make sure that everybody was safe. It wasn't this type of occupying force that was militarized, that was in riot gear. The whole tenor is different in some communities.
When Obama talked the other day, he was mentioning the limits to what can be done on a federal level, because so much of this is under local control. I know you're on Brighton School Board, Brighton Town Board now. How does what you just described actually get fixed?
Well, again, I do think that we need federal standards. We have federal standards for our military, and so they have rules for engagement. And those rules for engagement are consistent across the board. And what we see in our police communities is that some communities have a a very community-oriented type of neighborhood policing policy and philosophy, and other communities do not have those connections with their communities. They don't bother to build those relationships with their communities, and the majority of the police force is from outside of that community, and we see disparate policing as a result.
As a U.S. Congresswoman, will you be able to effectual change on that?
Absolutely. There are currently bills before Congress. One is in the Senate, the Next Step Act, that actually does create some federal standards for policing. And I think unless we start to track some of this information, because that's another thing, we have state and local laws that prevent us from even seeing the disciplinary records of a lot of our police force. And so we can't begin to implement the policy unless we have the information available. And the information is not going to be available unless we change and repeal some of the laws that we have in place protecting the privacy of police.
All right, everybody, wiltforcongress.com. I'm going to bring in now the first of our guests who want to ask you questions. Robin, the first is a woman named Ashley Gant. So Ashley Gant, come into the Zoom room so that you can talk to Robin. Hi, how are you? Welcome. I hope we can get you unmuted there.
Marianne.
Hi,
how are you all?
Welcome, Ashley. Here's Robin. Wilt, ask away.
So Robin, first I thought you did amazing. But one question that I had is Joe Morelli, who is your opponent, really likes to talk about how it's important to have experience to be running for Congress in this district. So my question is, what would you say to people who say you lack experience?
Oh, that's a really good question. And it is
lack serious. You're not serious enough. Is that what you said, Ashley?
No.
Is that what you said? Who's what?
No, I said Joe Morelli, who is Robin's opponent, talks about how important it is to have experience when you're running in this district.
Oh, experience. I'm sorry. Okay, go on.
What would you say to folks who think that you lack experience?
Yeah, well, again, I think that we have to look at the type of experience that people bring to the table. And one of the things that I find interesting about the experience that Joe Morelli brings to the table is that it is that of a career politician dealing with a very corrupt system in Albany. Joe Morelli stood next to some of the most corrupt politicians that we've had in our state who have since been incarcerated. And so the type of experience that I bring is that of people-centered policy within the communities that I serve. Mm-hmm. So on the Brighton Town Board, one of the things that we were able to implement is police accountability. We were able to say to our community that we wanted to make sure that it wasn't third-party arbiters that decided police discipline, but that power would lie with the town board, your elected officials, so that you could give accountability on that account. And secondly, we also implemented community choice aggregation. This was a win-win policy where the community actually pulls its purchasing power in order to source its energy more sustainably, 100% renewable energy, and hopefully at lower costs, because what we're doing is purchasing not as individuals, but we're using the Costco model, right? We're purchasing together. And so we can negotiate better rates with our utility. That, and we've also implemented rent source non-discrimination in the town of Brighton, where we have improved the diversity of our town because landlords can no longer discriminate against you because you're getting Section 8 for housing subsidies. These are the type of people-focused policies that help all of us in our communities. It helps our communities thrive. It doesn't leave anybody behind.
And that's the kind of experience that matters most. This whole qualification and experience talk is really used to make it very difficult for some of the new blood and the new energy that we most need in politics to get in. There's this delusion that only people who have spent years and years and years entrenched within the system that drove us into a ditch should possibly be considered qualified to lead us out of the ditch. And not only the things that you just described, for me, certainly paint a picture of experience, but also to me, the main qualification, which is your moral certitude about what needs to change in this country. And I know I certainly appreciate it. Ashley, anything else you want to bring up for Robin, or do you feel satisfied that she answered your question?
I feel satisfied. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much for being
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you for your question.
And there's somebody else who wants to ask you a question, Robin. So if it's okay with you, I'm going to bring her in as well.
Okay, please.
Her name is Iman Abid. Okay, Iman Abid, join us in the Zoom room. Hi, how are you? Okay, let's get you unmuted so you can ask your question of Robin.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Iman.
So I think with all the conversation on Black Lives Matter, some of us have almost forgotten that we're still in a pandemic. And so on that front, how are you feeling about the federal response to COVID-19? And is there anything you would do differently?
Thank you. That is an excellent question. And one of the things that I like to say about the COVID-19 pandemic is that it didn't create the problems that we're facing. What it did is expose the existing problems and gaps in our public safety net. And it's exasperated in certain communities where we've seen those disparate impacts. And I think that it's very telling that the initial federal response was to first give billions of dollars, like $500 billion to Wall Street, and instead of Main Street. And I think unless we focus on policies that are going to help Main Street, we are not going to come out of this pandemic stronger. And another major gap that I saw was that we did not have rent cancellation. We saw rent and mortgage cancellation, because when we see unemployment numbers to the extent that we've seen, we used to talk about a labor apocalypse, and then we used to theorize about the loss of 20 million jobs. And here we are having lost 40 million jobs, twice that number. And we do not have the necessary employment insurance in place and the necessary healthcare in place to service those communities who have been directly impacted by loss of employment and loss of health insurance. So we've seen and then I think that a lot of researchers have demonstrated through past experiences with, the influenza pandemic of 1918 and most recently, the Great Recession, that the thing that helps us come out of these circumstances, these devastating economic circumstances, stronger is by getting money into hands of people who are going to spend it right away. And by focusing on Wall Street, where we're not going to have that economic stimulus among the masses, we've created a situation where we can't emerge from the pandemic and the economic devastation that we've seen stronger.
Anything else, Iman? Do you feel that she answered that appropriately?
Yeah, thank you so much, Robin.
Conversation, you cool? There are certainly some things I'd like to say to that. And thank you, Iman. I really appreciate it very much for having been with us. Robin, I think that you were very kind to the system right now in a way that the system does not deserve. Basically, this bailout is the same template as from 2008, even under a Democratic president, bailed out Wall Street and did not bail out Main Street. We already had, as you would certainly be aware, even before the pandemic, 40% of Americans couldn't afford a $400 unexpected expenditure. Our government has told the American people to drop dead on this. If you're rich, you'll make it through. And I appreciate your charity. I'm outraged. And I think that my sense is a lot of the protesting going on the street today, it's bigger than George Floyd. It's bigger than the execution of Black men. It is the entire system that produces that, because our economic system is brutal. It's not just that our criminal justice system is brutal. It's not just that our educational system. I think it's a form of brutality, passive brutality, not to educate a child, teach a child to read by the time they're 8. Our economic system is brutal. This is brutal. And in other countries of comparable wealth, where they have given direct cash relief to 80% of people's salary in countries like England. And this is what I want to ask you, Robin. Even the Democrats, even the CARES package that Nancy put out there, knowing that it's not going to pass anyway because of the Senate being in the hand of the Republicans. So you think she'd really say what we should stand for? Even she is only in the CARES Act suggesting another $1,200 one-time payment. How are people, there are people right now, they're being evicted as we speak. And hunger. We already have 40 million people who are hungry in the United States. We already had 13 million children going to school hungry. I saw pictures 2-3 weeks ago, lines and lines and lines of cars hoping for a $30 food coupon. Our food pantries are overwhelmed. So explain to me, as a Democratic candidate, and I think so many people who are watching tonight, I want to be a Democrat. I ran for president as a Democrat. I've been a Democrat all my life, but we all know what's going on there. We all know the struggle, the tension between the corporatist Democrat and the progressive Democrat. How can the Democratic Party not be standing for direct cash relief? How can the Democratic Party not be standing for $2,000 a month for every adult, $1,000 for every child, $1,000 a month after that for everyone? What do we stand for if we don't stand for that kind of proactive? I remember at one of the Democratic debates where I think it was the first one where I said, some of you guys, I don't even know why you're Democrats, because you seem to have a problem with government helping people. Right. So what's the deal? How are we going to transform the Democratic Party? Because if that doesn't happen, there's going to be such a mass exodus from it. And then tell me your thoughts.
I agree. We need to become the party of the people once again. There was a time when FDR saved capitalism, actually.
I'm saving. I'm not destroying capitalism. I'm saving capitalism.
Absolutely, absolutely. And especially at this time, the Progressive Caucus put out a package that was truly people-centered. And they picked and chose from, the leadership in Congress right now, picked and chose, what they were going to honor and what they weren't going to honor. But that package was what the American people needed to emerge from this pandemic in a humane way. And I think the Democratic Party has lost its way. They have become less humane.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like the Republicans the party is overrun by forces that actually think this corporate aristocracy of health insurance companies and big pharmaceutical companies, food companies, oil and gas companies, gun manufacturers, oil and gas companies, defense contractors, they don't see anything wrong with this corporate aristocracy. They don't see anything wrong with submitting to the American people that our economic abundance lies from just dropping some crumbs from their table. But too often the Democratic Party says, you don't have to take crumbs, we'll get you a cookie. The American people deserve not just crumbs, they deserve more than a cookie as well. They deserve to be at the table.
We deserve the whole pie. And I think that one of the things that was highlighted during this pandemic is that the strength of the American economy lies in the American laborer. The American workforce is what drives this economy. And when they are hurting, everything is at a standstill.
Well, the way that system sees it, however, they're doing fine.
Mm-hmm.
So the people who are doing fine and who architected this bailout would not agree with you. They're doing just fine, because that kind of a system actually requires that people be just enough at survival mode that pretty much will do anything.
Right.
But I think that that's suffering
as a result.
I think that the people who are on the street today, there is an underlying realization that it's injustices that are so entrenched in the system. It is environmental injustice as well. And of course, how that impacts, of course, people of color. It is environmental injustice, and it is economic injustice, and it is criminal injustice. And I think it's so important to get people like yourself into office, because if something doesn't fundamentally change, and I think really where we're going, especially with this president, is that something is fundamentally changing. It's either going to change for the better or for the worse.
Right. Yeah, we literally are at a cusp in history where we could go either way. And if we do not go in the way that supports the people, we are going to end up with revolution. I think it's that serious. We have to vote as though our lives depend on it, because they literally do.
I think certainly, and I think Black people leading the vanguard of that message, that
Yeah.
they can say that's not metaphor for us,
Right.
not
Right.
symbol for us. And of course, if they can, I was always raised, if they can do it to anybody, they can do it to us.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are seeing now with these protests, and how in some cases, and I'm sure you're not anti-police, I'm not anti-police, the vast majority of them are very fine public servants, and I really feel for many of them who are really taking the brunt of things done by people with a very different consciousness and very different behavioral patterns than they. But at this point, Americans don't know where to go. They don't know what to do. And once again, what they need to know is that there are people like you. There are. Once again, wiltforcongress.com. Would you please tell our audience, how can people support you? How can people, we know the people, what you need from the people in your district is for them to vote for you. What can other people who are not living in your district, how can they support you, Robin?
Well, we are a grassroots-based campaign, so we do not accept any money from corporate PACs. All of our support.
I have to say there, that always makes me laugh when I hear a progressive say that. These people are not waiting to donate to you, but it's nice that you wouldn't take the money.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, no corporate PACs support us. So we are 100% people powered. So whatever people can spare in terms of monetary support, it is so welcome, because we are fighting against a corporate Democrat who takes thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars from the health insurance industry. And so he opposes Medicare for all, who takes tens of thousands of dollars from developers. And so he doesn't support equitable housing reform. These are the types of forces that we're up against. And the only thing that we have to fight back is the people. And so you can donate to our campaign at Wilt for Congress, WILTFOR Congress.com. We are also on Facebook at Robin Wilt for Congress, and we are at on Instagram and Twitter at Wilt for Congress.
What about phone banking? Do you need people to phone bank for you from who are in your district?
Yeah, one of the things that we've realized is that we don't have as many tools in our toolbox anymore, given the pandemic. And phone banking is one of the most effective way to reach people right now. We have virtual phone banking. So regardless where you are in the country, you can phone bank for our campaign. Again, go to wiltforcongress.com/get involved, and you will be able to help out either phone banking or text banking. That's an area where we've been extremely successful, because that is reaching a newer, younger voter that is very engaged at the moment. So you can phone bank for our campaign, you can text bank for our campaign, and we appreciate all the help that we can get. Or you could just become a social media ambassador. Sometimes we just need people to amplify our voice. And while we've seen our social media impressions increase vastly over the last few weeks, we're getting 60,000 impressions per week. Yeah, we could still use more people to amplify our message because it is so important at this point, especially when there's so much confusion regarding voting during the pandemic. And we provide a lot of information to people on how to vote and when to vote. So please just share our page, like our page, make sure that you're amplifying our message, because our message is very saleable. You know, most of the people are overwhelmingly support the platform that we're bringing forward. We are bringing forward the platform of the people, and all we need to do is make sure that people know about it.
You know, a lot of times, particularly these days, people share that they feel so desperate, hopeless, even cynical. Remember, cynicism is just an excuse for not helping. Every time that you actually do something to invoke the light, the darkness has less power. And that's just the way energy operates. And hope is born of participation in hopeful solutions. So every day there's something you can do for a progressive. Tonight, if your heart aligns with Robin, and I can't imagine that it doesn't, what can you do for Robin? And most of us are home. What can you do? And I think people sometimes just need to develop the habits. You know, de Tocqueville talked about the habits of democracy, and too many Americans never developed, or even if they had it, then lost the habits, the muscles, the mental habit patterns of democracy. Yes, you go to your town board meeting. Yes, you know what's going on in your local elections. You know, one of the things that I've been talking about, Robin, is we have to do more than just wake up at this moment. We have to wake up and stay awake. And I think one of the things that we're seeing from everything that has happened in this country is, you know, the French say, if you don't do politics, politics will do you. Too many people opted out. Too many people just left the doors open to our democracy, left the windows open, were too careless, too reckless. And sometimes because people were just so exhausted and we're so hopeless. And I think in you, who you are, what you stand for, so many people can say, well, wow, she's someone who's talking, who embodies, look who her parents are, look what her color is, look what her consciousness is. Maybe we can do this. You know, it's the 11th hour, but it's not midnight yet. And you so embody the new America. And I so hope for you that you receive the support you need. And you will be one of those, people that I so want to know. Did Robin win her primary? Her primary is June 23rd.
That's correct.
And you've heard about her opposition. The man who is in there now, who won just the plurality to take Louise Slaughter's seat. He's an old machine, a Democratic machine. Was in, you know, I'm sure he's a lovely man. It's very much same old. And the fact that it's not Trump, it's still, that kind of corporatism enabled Trump.
Absolutely.
It enabled him.
Yeah,
So,
that's why people are disaffected from our system.
That's right.
System is not working for them. And I like to say that the system is not broken. The system is functioning exactly as intended. It's intended to disadvantage certain people and advantage others. And until we have the masses of people who are benefiting from this system, we are going to continue to get the same disparate outcomes.
That's right. And that's why we have to vote. And that's why we have to show up for these candidates. I have a question for you. Are you having fun doing this?
I am. You know what?
You are.
You know, I've been an activist. I've been an activist for decades. So just seeing this campaign take hold and this community express the hope that is embodied in this campaign has been absolutely the most rewarding thing that I've ever experienced.
Well, it's nothing compared to how rewarding it will feel to the rest of us to see you in there. I want you to win that primary. Let me ask you a question. What is it already an overwhelming Democratic district? So if you win so you just need to win that primary, because if you win the primary, we're good, right?
We're strongly D+8 district. We are definitely a Democratic district, strongly Democratic district. And so the race is in the primary.
Okay, you heard it, everybody. Wilt for Congress. The primary is June 23rd. Please do everything you can. Don't just say, oh, I like her. If you like her, do something. And I wish you the very, very best, Robin. And I want to thank you, Dawn Zuppelli. Thank you very, very much. I want to tell everybody what we're going to be doing for the remaining nights in our summit. Tomorrow night, we have Shan Chowdhury, who's also running in New York in District 5. On Monday night, we have Jim Perriman, who is running against Nancy Wasserman Schultz in Florida, 23. And also Tuesday, Robin, do you know Keita Haynes? Have you met Keita?
I've not met Keita Haynes. I've been involved with a lot of the other progressive New York candidates. But.
Yeah, Keita is really an inspiring story, and that will be on Tuesday night, June 9th. I really thank all of you who are attending the summit, who are meeting these candidates. I hope that they are as inspiring to you as they are to me. I can't imagine that they're not. Robin, do you have any final words you'd like to say to everybody before we leave the Zoom room?
No, I just want to thank you again, Marianne, for holding this summit. I think it's so important. As you say, the Congress is a co-equal branch of government. Yes. And regardless what is going on at the executive level, if we do not have strong leadership, strong people-focused leadership in Congress, we cannot enact the policies that will benefit the people. So,
and do not kid yourself, everyone. You know, non-governmental organizations are great, but no amount of private charity can compensate for a basic lack of social justice. And no matter how many nonprofit organizations, and I've definitely been a nonprofit activist throughout my life, but nothing can substitute for change within the electoral system. And we know that there are forces out there who might like to make that very, very difficult for people. Don't let it happen. Don't let such forces have your country. I also want to thank tonight Howie Klein, a bit of a political mentor of mine. Don't forget his wonderful blog, Down with Tyranny. I want to thank the producer of the summit, Wendy Zoller, Scott Katamas. Thank you so much for helping us. Thank you, Dawn, for being here with us. That's great to have the sign language interpretation. And I send you, Robin, all my love, all my best wishes. And I know I send that to you on behalf of thousands of people who are watching tonight. All my best, everybody. Thank you. I'll see you tomorrow night. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.